After 2 years of bruising negotiations, the World Trade Organization agreed on Friday to temporarily lift patents on COVID-19 vaccines. But experts feel that this move comes a little too late to be effective. The agreement came after all 164 WTO members green-lighted the deal, which will now grant developing countries the right to produce COVID vaccines for 5 years, without the consent of the right holder.
In response to the ongoing shocks from COVID-19, the declaration you just adopted will make access to medical supplies and components more predictable in this pandemic and in the next one. The TRIPS waiver compromise will contribute to ongoing efforts to deconcentrate and diversify vaccine manufacturing capacity so that a crisis in one region does not leave others cut off.
Countries like South Africa and India have been calling for intellectual property rights for COVID vaccines to be waived since October 2020. This would have allowed developing countries to boost their production to address the gaping inequality between rich and poor countries when it comes to vaccines. But Friday's compromise fell short of its earlier request that the waiver should apply to all countries and cover COVID tests and treatment. Experts also pointed out that while vaccines are scarce they were scarce early on in the pandemic, that is no longer the case. As of mid-June, nearly 14 billion doses had been produced worldwide, and as supply soars, some vaccine makers like India's Serum Institute have stopped production due to falling demand. And yet many countries, developing countries in particular, still lag behind when it comes to vaccination. While 60% of the world's population has received both the vaccine doses, in Libya, that number falls to 17% and to 8% in Nigeria, or less than 3% in Papua New Guinea. Pharmaceutical companies have also pointed out that in developing countries, the hurdle is not producing vaccines, but distributing them. The WTO also agreed to a deal aimed at curbing overfishing. The agreement has hailed as a major turning point, even though conservationists agreed that more could have been done. The deal targets subsidies that contribute to illegal and unregulated fishing and bans support to fishing in areas where fish stocks are overstretched. Developing countries will be exempt for 2 years.
On fisheries subsidies, WTO members have for the first time concluded an agreement with environmental sustainability at its heart. This is also about the livelihoods of the 260 million people who depend directly or indirectly on marine fisheries. The agreement prohibits support for illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing. It bans support for fishing in overfished stocks, and it takes a first but significant step forward to curb subsidies for overcapacity and overfishing by ending subsidies for fishing on the unregulated high seas.
Negotiations towards banning subsidies that encourage overfishing had been going on at the World Trade Organization since 2001. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.